In today's video, we have some more updates on Patrik Laine potentially ending up with the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to take a look at some articles and new information from different pieces of the Montreal media. An article from Habs Fanatics looking at a potential trade that could involve Laine going to the Habs in exchange for as many as 4 pieces from Montreal. So we'll take a look at what that might look like. We're also going to take a look at some of the top remaining unrestricted free agents that are still remaining unsigned. Plus, we do have some signings today as well, including one of those UFAs that have been waiting a long time in Allred Shillington. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. We do have a handful of signings, some of which are in the NHL, and some are former players of the NHL heading overseas. The Colorado Avalanche today announced that they've signed defenseman Allred Shillington to a 1-year contract valued at $1.05 million. Of course, Shillington was one of those players that we're going to talk about here shortly. Some of the top remaining UFAs that have, obviously waited way longer than they probably ever expected to sign a new contract for next season or beyond. Certainly his time with the Calgary Flames is now officially over. It's a little bit surprising, to be honest, that they weren't able to come to terms to keep him there. I do believe there was interest from Calgary after everything Shillington's been through for the past couple of years. I think they were kind of hopeful that he would return and want to work out, a contract. I've heard some rumblings, and I can't say that they were truth or not, but that he had rejected contract extension from the Flames. Not so much that he didn't want to be there, but more so just thought he could get a better offer. It's what it sounded like. Turns out that then probably isn't really the case. I don't know what they offered, but I'm sure it had to be at least what he got here. Of course, the Avalanche will give him a good chance to win, being a very strong team, but they also have a very strong blue line, so it's hard to say how big his role is going to be. And of course, based on the value of the contract, if for any reason things don't work out, they can place him on waivers and the full contract can be buried in the minors. But he certainly will add some extra depth to the Avalanche defense core. Great skater, good puck mover, and we'll see how things work out. The Blackhawks today have also signed one of their first round picks from the 2024 NHL draft. He was the second one taken in that draft by the Hawks. That's Merrick Vanacker. He signs his 3-year entry-level contract. A couple former players, as I mentioned, are heading overseas. Stephen Kampfer, who's played a bit in the NHL, also a fair bit in the American Hockey League, a player that's getting a little bit older now. He is signed in the KHL with Tractor. And Jerard Fagerberg, still a reasonably young defenseman, battled some knee injuries. Fagerberg certainly had a lot of promise, being a fairly high pick. I believe he was a second rounder, if I'm not mistaken, with the Red Wings originally, probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And things have just never really developed for him. He had a good run in the queue. I've seen him play a fair bit. Looked like he had a lot of potential, a lot of promise. And it hasn't quite worked out for him to get that opportunity. And I really do think it's fair to say that some serious injuries certainly have kind of derailed his game. So he's signed over in Czechia, and we'll see how things work out and if he ever makes another attempt here at getting to the NHL. As I mentioned, there's still some interesting names out there in the UFA market that remain unsigned, and we're well into August now. Hard to say what some of these players are going to end up having to do. Clearly, we may see a couple of these guys maybe get contracts, but some of them are probably going to end up having to go on PTOs, or maybe they'll be done in the NHL. It's difficult to say, but you've still got guys like Tyler Johnson, Kevin LeBanc, Mike Hoffman, Tyson Barrie. That's interesting. I mean, I know Tyson Barrie's kind of looked upon as being more of a power play specialist, so certainly somebody that, depending on what you have, if you have a couple of good offensive defensemen on your team, then you may not be interested, but you think he could play somewhere. So I'm not sure. So some of these guys might be a case of them being very picky, but in most of the cases here, are just not a whole lot of offers or really things for them to consider. Tyson Barrie, Justin Schultz is another defenseman as well that's out there. Jacob Verana, Max Pacioretty, John Klingberg, who barely really didn't play a whole lot last year with Toronto. Nick Cousins, Stanley Cup champion with the Florida Panthers. He'll have his day with the Cup here coming up soon, but doesn't have a contract for next season yet. Philip Zadina, who left money on the table with Detroit to go bet on himself to go to San Jose. And that has not worked out. And now he's done with the Sharks. That's another player that really had high potential, high promise from the draft in 2018. I know he was ranked right up there between, Brady Tkachuk, Svechnikov, all those guys, and he ended up going a little bit lower. And, obviously some of those teams kind of seen him being a little bit more of a perimeter player, might not be a guy that translates well to the NHL. He had a great run with the Halifax Mooseheads. Looked like he was going to be really good, but just has had a hard time getting that to translate over. I'm not sure what the future holds for Filip Zadina. Maybe somebody brings him in on a PTO. Hard to say. Goalie Kevin Lankinen and Antti Ranta, both without contracts. A couple of mainstays on the Islanders' fourth line, what they call the identity line for a long time, and Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin, both unsigned. I'm not sure if they're going to continue playing or what the future status is of either of them. We know that Lou does sometimes bring back surprise signings late into the offseason, but I don't really see, honestly, how that could work for them based on their cap situation, based on what we have heard around them. I don't think that's happening, but we will see. Some interesting names that they're still looking for work, as Oliver Shillington was just on that list, of course, before today. Now, as I mentioned, Patrik Laine, been a hot topic of conversation. Came across an article. Actually, I was reading it last night. Thought obviously, last night's video was already planned out, so we looked at for today about Patrik Laine. Being a Montreal Canadien. Of course, it's been something that's been discussed at great length. Lots of rumors around this player since he's been cleared from the NHL Player Assistance Program, or NHL/NHLPA Assistance Program. But the article from Habs Fanatics kind of covers the fact that we've heard, it kind of summarizes a few things. One of the sources that they reference for the trade that we're going to talk about claims that they had, obviously they're a well-connected source, so I can't, say that they are or they aren't, but we'll see. Like I said, when we come across these things, they're just interesting, fun things to talk about for this time of year. So, I'm sure there's going to be people who say, oh, that's never going to happen. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it won't. This is just for conversation piece. This is a rumor that's out there, and we will see what happens with it. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, well, we talked about it. We put our thoughts. We analyzed it, and we hopefully had a little bit of fun doing it. We moved on. It's just as simple as that. But, at the end of the day here, we've heard Stu Cowan, who works for the Montreal Gazette, he had made comments that Patrik Laine was spotted in Montreal. So, that wouldn't be shocking because, to be honest, I think Laine very well might have been doing a little bit of touring, if you will, talking to a few teams. I know Don Waddell had made comments a few days ago saying that there was only one team that appeared to be serious in trading for Laine, and that if he wanted to retain half of the salary, that he probably would have traded him already. So we know that they don't really want to retain. He's made it known that's not his first choice. But to get them to retain a portion of it is probably doable. But you're going to have to pay a little bit more of a price to do that. So essentially, the rumor that's come about from them through that, well, actually it was posted through the Habs Fanatic article, but obviously from the sources they quoted from social media, says that the Patrik Laine sweepstakes essentially would have him becoming a Montreal Canadien with 25% of his contract, roughly thereabouts. It was around $2.3 million, which is like between 25-27%, something like that, retained on Columbus's part to knock the salary down. So that gets him down to like, $6.5 million. And the return options for the Jackets, they'd have their choice between Christian Dvorak or Jake Evans, so one of the two veteran centers. Of course, they play a little bit of different style, same age though, different contracts, very different contracts. Dvorak makes a fair bit more money. You also have an option between young defensemen and Jaden Struble and Jordan Harris. Again, not exactly the same player, but Struble's a little bit younger than Harris, but one or the other. They also have a choice of a prospect in there, and these are not really what you'd call A-level prospects. This would be more of a B-level prospect of between Sean Farrell, Jared Davidson, and Riley Kidney, so one of those players. And they also have multiple second-round picks in next year's draft. One of those picks, whichever one is the lower pick. So you're looking at a pick, a prospect, and then two roster pieces. We've heard from credible sources, including Aaron Portzline, the beat writer for the Blue Jackets for The Athletic, who has said that he believes that Don Waddell would want roster pieces coming back. So players that can play with the Blue Jackets right away. So obviously they would get two pieces of that that would meet that criteria, then they would get a couple of, obviously other pieces with the pick and the prospect. There were options maybe for the future. I would suggest probably between Dvorak and Evans, they've probably taken Dvorak. I think he's got a little bit more upside. And obviously from Montreal's perspective, just from a salary cap, he makes more money. So Montreal would probably push for Dvorak to be included. Between Struble and Harris, not a great deal of difference, but Harris is a little bit older. And he's been the one that's been mentioned more in a lot of rumors. So, of course, if they truly are giving Columbus the choice to pick, maybe they take Struble. I don't know who they like better. But for argument's sake, let's just go with Harris. And then, of course, for the drafted players that are like prospects that are options, maybe Sean Farrell. I mean, Sean Farrell had a real good run in Harvard before coming out and signing with Montreal. So certainly, I think, but Riley Kidney also had a good run in junior. So it'd probably be one of those two players. Let's just say Sean Farrell, for example. So, you get a package of Dvorak, Harris, Farrell, and a second-round pick. I mean, at the end of the day, you're paying. The Dvorak contract's not really looked upon as being great. So if they're taking that contract plus they're retaining money on Laine, then you need to give up some extra assets to make them want to do that. So you're giving them a good young defenseman, you're giving them a B prospect, and you're giving them a second-round pick. I honestly think that's a pretty fair trade. Between the Harris contract and the Dvorak contract, that would be well over $5 million. That you're pushing. You wouldn't hit $6 million between the two, but you're getting close to that. And with Laine's retention, that would knock him down to around 6.5. So there's not a great deal of difference in the money. So money wise, it's pretty close. You get a few young assets to the Blue Jackets. You get a potential, prime goal scorer that's still in a young age who can be revitalized. Hopefully, at least that's the plan with the Montreal Canadiens, who can play with some top players and hopefully find that scoring touch that he had in his early days with the Winnipeg Jets. And in all honesty, I think that would be a good trade for both sides. Now, is it perfect? Not necessarily. We know that the Laine return to Columbus, it's not going to be like all grade A level stuff. Like, they're not going to get a huge haul. He's not the 40 goal scoring winger that when he was traded, obviously the first time the Jets got Pierre-Luc Dubois, who at that time was, his value was certainly higher than it was this year when he was traded to Washington. But Laine's not the same player. He's had a couple of rough seasons, in a sense with injuries and off-ice stuff. But if you take a look at his productivity, though, even in the more limited number of games, it's still been pretty good. It really has been. Like, it's not terrible in that sense. So if he can stay healthy, and if this program that he went through has kind of helped him get everything kind of right for himself, that he's in the good physical and mental shape, and he goes into with a fresh start, new team with some top talented players, I don't see any reason why he couldn't become that goal scorer yet again. Obviously there were lots of talk about the Habs acquiring another player that's 25 and under, like within that age group to fit with this group this offseason, and it has not happened yet. So as we talked about in the video I put out earlier today, look in the GM report card series in the Habs, I gave Ken Hughes not the best grade, but I gave him a little bit of a cut him a little slack because I felt like his report card might be a little incomplete, because I think there's another deal that he's going to do before they get to training camp, and maybe it's this, maybe it's something a little bit different, but I just see them still likely getting something done. So let me know what your thoughts are on that trade. I know another piece of news regarding Laine also came out today. Michael Russo, who also writes for The Athletic from Minnesota, had made comment that he feels the Wild and Bill Guerin are definitely going to be interested as well, and that Guerin may attempt to speak and meet with Laine sometime here in the coming days as well. He calls the fit with Minnesota a no-brainer. Obviously, the Minnesota Wild do have a need for that type of player and for adding more scoring. The only problem is they do have a very, very challenging salary cap situation with those huge buyout amounts still factoring in from Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. So obviously they would not have the same ability that a team like Montreal or other teams with more cap flexibility would have. They would obviously have to include a similar amount of money going out. They'd probably need them to retain a little bit as well, like this Montreal proposed trade. And I'm not sure who off the roster they would offer up to come close on that. But at the end of the day, does it make sense to some degree? I think it'd be really, really, really challenging, and I don't know that they could pull it off. I think now the other article that was originally that I was looking at referenced, of course, Buffalo being another team to watch in the Laine sweepstakes here too. So obviously, we know he's going to get traded at some point, just a matter of where and for what. So let me know your thoughts on the latest rumblings around Laine in Montreal. Do you like this kind of package? Do you think it makes sense for both sides? Could it legitimately happen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.